Every year in October, a haunted house on the edge of town opens its doors to visitors. Surrounded by dark woods, it has three main areas: the haunted house, the corn maze, and the creepy trail through the woods. My group of friends, Rod, James, and Bud, nicknames, and I decided to test our courage here. We started with the haunted house, where the scares were well executed and delivered plenty of heart-stopping moments. Then the group headed into the corn maze. At first, everything seemed pretty normal, just twisting and turning through rows of tall corn. But then the game started when a man dressed as a scary scarecrow suddenly appeared from the corn, screaming, sending us screaming and running away. As usual, I was always the last to run, and I could feel the fear as the scarecrow chased after me. In a panic, we ran in different directions. I lost my friends and ended up alone in the maze. I shouted for them, but was met with an eerie silence. The feeling of loneliness crept in as I groped my way through the maze. After a long while of wandering around, I heard a noise coming from a nearby corn clump. I mustered up all my courage and walked very quietly to avoid attracting attention. But suddenly a cold hand reached out from the corn clump and grabbed my wrist. The squeeze was so strong that I screamed in pain. In the dim light, I could only see that the arm was covered by a thick black coat and black gloves. I jerked my hand away and stepped back, watching in horror as a man slowly walked out of the corn clump. He was wearing a winter coat, black jeans, and a blank, expressionless black mask. Completely confused, I shouted, "You're hurting me!" But he didn't say anything, just stood there, staring at me. Without hesitation, I turned around and ran. As I ran, I shouted, "I'll call the police!" After running through the corn and back to the main road, I found an employee and told him everything. But when I described the man, the employee looked confused, saying that no one dressed like that worked here. At this time, I received a call from James. He said that the group had gone to the forest trail because they couldn't find me. I decided to go see them, hoping to forget that scary incident. However, as soon as I stepped into the forest path, I suddenly realized that the atmosphere here was different. Halloween music echoed from the loudspeakers but couldn't dispel the creepy feeling. And then I saw him, the man in black, standing in the way. He looked straight at me and started running towards me. I didn't think much of it and immediately ran into the deep woods, shouting that I would call the police. But the footsteps behind me quickly stopped. I sat down under a tree, trying to catch my breath. But then, the sound of dry leaves rustling nearby. When I looked over, he was standing there, just a few steps away from me. I stood up, trembling and shouting, "I will sue you!" But he didn't care, just rushed forward, pushing me to the ground. Panicking, I got up and ran towards the exit. When I reached the main area, he had disappeared. I told the manager the whole story and the police were called. But what chilled me the most was the manager's assertion, "We don't have any actors dressed like that." After that night, I never went back to such places again. When I was 13, my best friend Min invited me and two other friends, Hung and Kwang, to his house for a Halloween night. Min lived in a big house outside of town, the perfect place to trick-or-treat. We decided to go trick-or-treating before heading back to the house to watch a movie and get some snacks. As the sky began to darken, the group set out on their trick-or-treating trip. We knocked on many doors and got a lot of candy, but at one house down the street, things started to get strange. The woman who opened the door was tall, thin, with shoulder-length hair. She looked very sloppy, and the smell of cigarettes wafted from inside the house. She quickly said she was out of candy, but she would come in and get some for us. We waited outside the door, feeling increasingly uncomfortable as we looked at the old messy house. A moment later, she returned with an old-looking brown paper bag with some candy inside that looked to be past its expiration date. Politely refusing, we said that our parents were coming to pick us up and that we had to leave. Suddenly, she grabbed Kwang's hand and pleaded, "Don't go!" Panicking, Kwang jerked his hand away, and she quickly slammed the door shut. We left immediately, but the feeling of unease still lingered. After the last few houses, the group returned to the parking lot where Min's parents were waiting. As we neared the place, a loud scream startled us. A woman screamed, "They took my child! They took my child!" It was the woman from the house, and she was pounding on Min's parents' car. She screamed loudly and even rushed into the car, repeatedly punching the window with her fists. A few neighbors ran over to pull her out and apologized to us, saying that she had lost control and that it was all a misunderstanding. We quickly got in the car. Min's mother drove away immediately. But before we could go far, she suddenly jumped out in front of the car, screaming, "One of you is my son!" Even though we had returned home, we could not forget what had just happened. However, the group still tried to relax, turned on horror movies, and ate candy. Around midnight, when the group was exhausted, the lights in the hallway suddenly turned on. The light shone through the crack in the door, making us think Min's parents were about to come in to warn us. But we waited for a long time and saw no one. Gathering all my courage, I went out to the hallway to check. There was nothing. My two friends followed. While looking around, Hung suddenly pointed to the large window overlooking the backyard, whispering, She's there." We froze. Outside the window, the woman stood still, her eyes staring straight into the room. But as soon as she saw us, she ran away, disappearing into the darkness. The group ran into the room, locked the door, and tried to stay calm. We asked ourselves, why did she come here? How did she know we were here? These unanswered questions kept swirling in our heads, making it impossible for us to sleep. The next morning, when we told Min's mother about this, she revealed that last night she also felt strange. She said she dreamed of that woman standing right next to her bed, staring at her. Hearing this, the group turned pale. We had never told her that she had appeared in the backyard last night. That led to a terrifying thought. What if she really got into the house last night? After that night, we never dared to return to that area on Halloween again. That woman with her scary eyes left a haunting impression on me for many years to come. Last year, Halloween fell on a Wednesday, so I was home alone. My dad was working the night shift, my mom was at my sister's house because they were having a disagreement, and my sister was away at college. I was the only one home to hand out candy to the trick-or-treaters. My dad, as usual, bought a few bags of Kit Kats and told me to give them all out. He always made Halloween a big deal, although I never understood why. I didn't get home from school until about 6 p.m. It was already dark, and kids in colorful costumes were knocking on doors. As I put my bag on the sofa, the doorbell rang. The doorbell rang continuously for several hours. I kept handing out candy, and I also did my homework. By about 9 p.m., the kids started to thin out, and I thought the night was almost over. But then the doorbell rang again. I picked up the nearly empty bowl of candy and went to open the door, thinking that maybe this would be the last group of kids. But it wasn't. Standing in front of the door was a man. He was about 35 years old, thin, wearing a worn gray jacket. He didn't open the glass door, but just stood there waving with a strange expression, neither happy nor sad. I stood still looking at him, not sure what to do. After a few seconds, he stopped waving and reached for the glass door handle. As soon as the glass door opened, I slammed the main door shut and locked it. My heart was pounding, and I immediately texted the family chat group that a strange man had just tried to open the door. My dad, in his usual joking manner, replied, "If he does it again, go out and teach him a lesson?" I decided not to open the door again. I went upstairs and turned off all the lights, hoping that he would leave. About half an hour later, as I was trying to concentrate on my homework, I started hearing screaming outside. I lost my patience and opened the window to look down. There he was, right below my window, staring straight up and shouting that he was looking for his son. I didn't believe him at all. I felt uneasy when I saw his lifeless eyes. I texted the family group again, and my dad just said, "Just ignore him. He'll go away." I went downstairs to the basement to get away from the window and tried to finish my homework. But then, the lights in the house suddenly went out. The whole house was dark. I figured he must have broken the electrical box in the yard. The sound of creaking floorboards could be heard from upstairs. My heart sank when I realized that he had gotten into the house. I texted my family repeatedly, and everyone advised me to call the police immediately. I did as I was told and hid in the basement, where there were no windows, which felt safer. As I tried to keep quiet, I heard the basement door open. The dim light from upstairs shone down, just enough for me to see his feet on the middle step of the stairs. He stood there for a few minutes, the longest minutes of my life. I heard him mumble something, but I couldn't understand it. Then he said loudly, "I saw you." I froze. Even though he wasn't looking directly at me, I felt like his invisible gaze was piercing me. There was a loud knock on the front door. The police had arrived. The man turned and went up the stairs. I waited a few seconds before running out the front door, but he was gone. The police found no trace of him in the house or in the yard. They found the back door unlocked, and as I suspected, he had broken into the electrical box to cut the power. That night, I couldn't sleep. I didn't know if he had chosen my house simply because it was Halloween or for some other creepy reason. But what I knew for sure was, he didn't belong in this neighborhood. About 4 years ago on Halloween night, my best friend Tanner and I decided to do something scary to celebrate. We were both college students at the time, and rumors of an abandoned house on a hill near our school piqued our curiosity. The house was nicknamed Blair Witch House by other students because it was isolated on a vacant lot, surrounded by woods, and no one had lived there for years. We had heard many spooky stories about the place, but none of us had ever dared to visit it. That night around 10 p.m., Tanner drove me up the trail to the house. He parked in a vacant lot outside the lot, and from there, we had to walk up the hill. The light from our weak flashlights was just enough to light the way, and the darkness around us seemed to swallow everything up. The house loomed before us, its windows broken and the front door ajar, inviting. My heart was pounding, but curiosity kept us going. Tanner had brought a backpack full of tools like a flashlight, a knife, and a crowbar, but surprisingly, we didn't need them because the front door was already open. Inside it was dark, not a single ray of light coming in. A musty smell filled our nostrils, and everything in the house seemed to have been cleared out long ago, leaving only trash and broken furniture. As we passed the living room, a noise came from upstairs, a thud, as if someone had jumped onto the floor. Tanner and I looked at each other, neither of us saying a word, but we both knew we had to check it out. The stairs leading upstairs were rotten and creaked under our feet. We tried to tread lightly, but the sound echoed throughout the house. Upstairs, a small hallway opened up with 3 doors. The first room was a small bedroom, with only a rusted bed frame remaining. The second room on the left was an empty bathroom. The last door on the right side of the hallway led to a large bedroom. We entered, our flashlights shining in every dark corner. This was definitely the master bedroom. An old bed frame was still in the middle of the room, and the wooden floor seemed to have been carpeted but now had only patches of glue. Suddenly, the door behind us slammed shut with such force that the whole room shook. Before I could process what was happening, a flash of white light filled the room, and then again, like a camera flash. Tanner screamed and rushed to open the door. I followed him closely, not daring to look back. We ran down the stairs, leaving everything behind. Once we were safely back in the car, Tanner drove straight back to the dorms without saying a word. We were both too scared to discuss what had happened, but the story didn't end there. A week later, Tanner texted me a photo. It was a hard copy of the 2 of us in the master bedroom of that house. He said it had been left under his windshield wiper that morning. I felt a chill run down my spine. How could someone have taken that photo? And how did they know who we were? I just told Tanner to throw it away and park somewhere else. We only told this story to a few close friends. None of us dared to go back to that house. But I often wondered, who took that photo? And were they watching us?